千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. As always, I want to extend my welcome to you. Thank you for joining us. I would like to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment in time, to the here and now, to be fully present and mindfully aware as we are ready ourselves for this sacred process in the Tao with one another. Now, without further ado, let's get started with Tao Te Ching, Chapter 6. Chapter 6 has a chapter title translated as The Valley Spirit. In the previous chapter, remember how Lao Tzu used the bellows as a visual metaphor for the Tao. The bellows is something that seems to contain nothing, and yet it continues to function indefinitely. Lao Tzu ended the previous chapter with a reference to the void. The void is the nothingness or emptiness of the Tao. This chapter continues that line of thought and brings in the valley spirit as another way to illuminate the concept. As we will see, the valley itself can be compared to a container. The container is useful when it is empty, and that maps to the emptiness of the Tao. Furthermore, what the valley contains is an environment for the myriad things. And this corresponds to the Tao being the source of life. So there's plenty to talk about. Let's get right into it. Tao Te Ching, Chapter 6. The valley spirit, undying, is called the mystic female. The gate of the mystic female is called the root of heaven and earth. It flows continuously, barely perceptible. Utilize it, it is never exhausted. So as we can see, this is a relatively short chapter with 6 lines. How can we divide up the 6 lines into sections? Here's how the division looks. As you can see, it's basically 3 sets of 2 lines each, 3 couplets. It is easy to identify the 3 sections when you look for similar characters or the same characters repeating from one line to the next. Scanning the Chinese characters top to bottom, we can see some repetitions. Let me highlight the most obvious one. So there, we've got 2 characters translated as is called. So this is a literal translation where the first character simply is translated as is. The second character translated as called. And those are the limited options of translating those two characters. Looking at this chapter, there aren't too many other repetitions. I would point out that the third character of the first line corresponds to the third character of the last line. Same character there, 不, which is negation. So in the top line, in line 1, the 不 in that line is translated as the un in undying. That's the negation. In the bottom line, line 6, the 不 is translated as never. Again, a negation. So in addition to no and not, there are options in translating that particular character. Now let's go right in to a line-by-line discussion of this chapter, starting with line 1. Line 1 is one of the most significant lines in this particular chapter. It isn't always true that the first line of every chapter in the Tao Te Ching is the most significant, but in this case, it is. And the first two characters are the most significant of this very short line containing only 4 characters. These two characters are 谷神. Easily translated, the first character simply is valley. Not too many options for translating that character. The second character there, 神, that means deity. So the deity of the valley is the valley spirit. It is the essence of the valley, which is the essence of emptiness, like an unfilled container. This is what I meant when I mentioned that you can visualize the valley itself like a bowl or a cup, a container that is meant to contain things. So that is the first aspect of the valley that we should pay attention to. The second, number 2, is that the space within the valley, it is spacious, it is expansive, it is able to accommodate all. This is a reference to the fact that the valley itself contains many different kinds of living things, including human beings. So the valley has the space to contain a lot. And this is mapped to a spaciousness, expansiveness, openness of the mind. We'll talk about that in a moment. Characteristic number 3, the third idea, is that the valley is nurturing of myriad things. This is affirming of life. The valley itself is a protective enclosure. You know, it's got the protective shielding of mountains or hills on all sides. And it is able to provide this environment that is conducive for the living things to thrive. So the nurturing aspect of the valley maps to the nurturing aspect of the Tao, which in turn maps to the nurturing aspect of ourselves. So again, we'll talk a little more about that. For now, though, I would like to dig a little more deeply in the 3 characteristics that you see here for the valley, starting with number 1, the essence of emptiness. Like an unfilled container. So this is reflective of the previous chapter, chapter 4, it talks about how the space between heaven and earth is not like a bellows. So I want to ask everyone to pay attention to the fact that in the previous chapter, it's at a different scale, but it's talking about the same idea, a container. The emptiness between heaven and earth, like a bellows, is like the emptiness in the valley, like a cup or a bowl. So these concepts are related. The ancient sages did not restrict themselves to just one particular metaphor, but had the agility of mind to jump back and forth among different kinds of analogies and metaphors. Then, the other thing to point out about the essence of emptiness is that it is the useful kind of emptiness. Already in chapter 4, when we looked at the bellows is useful in the work of a smith to pump a lot of air into the furnace. There are additional references to emptiness specifically being useful in the Tao. And an example that we haven't gotten to yet in our discussion this round of the Tao Te Ching chapters, one chapter ahead of us, chapter 11, has the following lines. It starts with 30 spokes join in one hub. In its emptiness, there is the function of a vehicle. So what it's saying is that when you look at a wheel, it's the spokes that form the wheel, but it is the hub of the wheel, the emptiness, the hole in the middle of the wheel that allows you to put an axle through the wheel. And that is what makes the wheel functional. So for a chariot or other conveyance, you absolutely need that hole in the middle of the wheel so that it can serve as a wheel for transportation. The emptiness of the container also is precisely what gives it its usefulness. Without the emptiness that is in a bowl or cup that hasn't been filled yet, it cannot serve that function. So in that regard, it is like the void of the Tao. Now, chapter 11 also uses a bunch of other examples to talk about emptiness. As I mentioned, the ancient sages had the agility of mind to jump around different metaphors, different examples to make a point. So chapter 11, after talking about the hole in the hub of a wheel, continues on to talk about a container made from clay, but forming this emptiness so that it can contain things. It also talks about how you need doors and windows. You need to cut openings of emptiness in a wall in order for a room to be accessible. If you just build the four walls but without any openings like doors or windows, there's no way to use the room. And therefore, chapter 11 says that which exists, that which has form, is used to create benefits, like the benefits of a wheel, benefits of a container, benefits of a house. That which is empty is used to create functionality. You gotta have some sort of emptiness there in order for that thing, whatever it is, to function. So back to chapter 5, that is also what the valley is saying. The valley has the useful kind of emptiness so that it can contain the myriad things. The fact that it has the functionality to contain the myriad things also references the second point, which is the nurturing aspect of it. It nurtures the myriad things, the living things that thrive in the valley. And this includes plants and animals, flora and fauna. So this is affirming of life, an orientation that is positive for life. So it's not just a container, it's a container of living things. It's not just a valley, but a fertile valley with a thriving ecology. And what humans can do when they move to this valley is that they can cultivate the land. They can plant the crop to be productive, to have a harvest. So when we map that to ourselves, we, as Tao cultivators, we want to emulate this essence. It is natural. The valley is a natural setting. It nurtures living things. There is both nature and nurture in this visual imagery. Now let's go on to number 3. Spacious and expansive, accommodating to all. This is important in the Tao. It depicts a mind that is open to new ideas, concepts, learning, knowledge, wisdom. And this is related, of course, to the unfilled cup, the container that is functional and useful for containing things, like the mind that is open to contain new ideas, new knowledge. The openness has another important thing about it, and that is the ability to accommodate and tolerate opinions different from your own. Different opinions are not good or bad, they're just different. And some opinions are going to have merit, some opinions will lack merit. It is possible that your own pre-existing opinions are insufficient when it comes to having merit. And it is like stale tea that you can choose to dump out to be replaced with fresh, fragrant, hot tea. And that will be a better, improved, new approach, new perspective to make you think in a better way. So this whole idea about being big enough to accommodate different opinions, for the Chinese, oftentimes they say 肚大能容, which is big stomach is able to contain, meaning tolerate, meaning accommodate, accept, be receptive to diversity of opinions. So they use the stomach as a metaphor for that. In the West, though, we use a different metaphor. The Eastern big stomach, in the West, we talk about the big heart. Someone having a heart that is big enough, that person is not petty, not a petty individual, is able to look at others with a generosity of spirits. That's the big heart. So it's very interesting that the big heart in the West maps to the big stomach of the East. Same idea, but expressed in different styles. So for that reason, I want to emphasize this because it has further implications in Eastern thought, including Buddhism. Remember, the idea is about the vastness of the Tao. The Tao contains all of existence, reflected in the valley, which offers plenty of room to accommodate everything and everyone. So what about our minds? The mind of the Tao cultivator should not be narrow-minded, should not be trapped in tunnel vision. should not be a closed mind. All of those will be contrary to the Tao. The vastness of the valley is room to contain the different things that are required to have a vibrant ecology. The more diversity you have, the better off you are likely to be. In a similar way, the more different concepts, different perspectives you can sample, the more likely it is that your own thoughts and ideas will be better formed, stronger. So then let's go ahead and extend into the amplification, implications of this idea into different areas of Eastern thought, areas that are incorporated right back into the Tao. So I want to show you this particular slide. To the left-hand side, you see the valley. To the right-hand side, you see what you may think of as the Buddha. So to clarify, this is not the Buddha that was the founder of Buddhism, but oftentimes mistaken as that in the West. This is in fact the Maitreya Buddha. In Buddhism, this is the Buddha of the prophecy, the Buddha that is foretold will come in the future. Specific name for that is the Maitreya Buddha. So the founder of Buddhism was the Sakyamuni Buddha. That's a different person. And the Sakyamuni Buddha was not a portly individual. The Maitreya Buddha manifested as a portly monk in ancient China hundreds of years ago, whereas the Sakyamuni Buddha lived in India 2,500 years ago. So again, different individuals. But the essence of the Maitreya Buddha is important and has correspondence with the valley. How so? Well, the valley to the left is open, as we talked about. It is accommodating and welcoming of all. That is the wide open nature of the valley. It provides its protection and riches to everyone in it. All that abundance, free for the taking, free for the asking, no complaints. It merely provides. Then the Maitreya Buddha. The big stomach of the Maitreya Buddha, as I mentioned in the previous slide, denotes someone who is big of heart, symbolic of being big-hearted, not petty, someone who's tolerant and giving. And this is goodness that leads to abundance. In the statue that you see on the right-hand side of this slide, there's a lot of kids climbing all over the smiling, laughing Maitreya Buddha. And this is a depiction of how the Maitreya Buddha really doesn't mind, does not find the kids to be annoying, is happy to be with them. That is the nature of the happy, quote-unquote, fat Buddha. It's okay. You can do whatever you want. The Buddha is perfectly fine with that. The Buddha, this particular Buddha, the Maitreya Buddha, is characterized as open and accepting, will happily provide divine protection to you, prosperity to all. So if people like these kids want to, quote unquote, take advantage of this Buddha, he's not going to mind that one bit. So typically in the West, we see the image of this Buddha and we think, oh, that's the happy Buddha. That's the fat Buddha. We think it's a symbol for good luck. Now, the teaching from the traditions from ancient Chinese culture goes a little deeper than that. For you see, it is the happiness. It's the generosity and the giving spirits that lead naturally to good luck. The positive energy that you manifest, if you possess those qualities of happiness, generosity, that giving spirit, that positive energy will come back naturally to you as good karma, good luck. So that's why it's a symbol of good luck. It, of course, makes the Maitreya Buddha the natural choice for Chinese merchants everywhere in the world. Certainly true in ancient times in China, but as the Chinese people migrated to different parts of the world, they brought the Maitreya Buddha with them as a powerful reminder, because those who know the essence of this Buddha will understand why it is so important to be nice and why it is so natural to be nice. The valley is nice to living things naturally. The Maitreya Buddha is nice to everyone naturally. We want to be nice to everyone we interact with. So it's a little strange when you contemplate that this combination of the image of the Maitreya Buddha, universally recognized, but then virtually unknown in terms of name. Like people will think, yeah, happy Buddha, fat Buddha, but they don't know the name Maitreya Buddha. So that alone is unusual and unique among all the various religious figures one comes across in the West. Moving on, let's take a look at the next two characters of this line. 不死. Literally, two simple characters, all translated in limited ways. There's the negation character, the no, not, sometimes never, and then the character for death, to die, dying. So the valley spirit does not die, because the spirits of the valley is an immortal concept. You can think of it as a universal energy of the Tao that drives life. Whatever it is that is causing life to go forward, whenever conditions permit. Note how life will always take root wherever it can to begin its growth. Whatever that power is, that is what we're talking about here, the essence of the valley. So this is like a deity for mythology. It is a spiritual essence that we can say is immortal. It has always existed in reality, and therefore it can never die off or disappear. Now let's take a look at the entire line together. The valley spirit, undying. When applied to people, the valley represents the portal to the true self. That is because the spirit of the valley will map to the soul or the spirit. And here I am talking about your soul. my soul, the individual's soul. Taken together, this line is a statement about the immortality of the soul. It is basically saying that the soul is eternal. It is everlasting. Now, mapping the valley to the self and the spirit of the valley to the soul, this, I think, is not well known in the West, but it comes from the authentic tradition of the Tao. So the physical body, we know, is going to age. It is aging now, even as we speak. But regardless of the condition of the physical body, it can wither, it can die, but the spirit is a different matter. Death is not the end. The spirit continues on. So we use the valley as a way to talk about that. Let me explain. We want to talk about the cycles that the valley goes through. We know that springtime comes, life begins anew. Green shoots appear on the ground. Leaves sprout on the trees. The flowers bloom. So life is evident. In the valley, it is starting to grow. Spring gives way to summer. If spring is the birth of new life, full of hope for the future, then summer represents the time when we are at our most active, powered by youthful energy. We're living in our prime. Just like we're saying that when summer is upon the valley, the myriad things are at their most active. Life flourishes at its prime. But then what follows after that? We know autumn will follow summer. It is the time of the bountiful harvest. Also time to prepare for the cold days to come. Autumn is the time to reap the rewards that we have worked on. In terms of a lifetime, the autumn of one's life is when the body is starting to show signs of age. Like the leaves on trees turning red and gold, withering, and then falling from trees. What comes after autumn? It's time for the colder temperatures of winter. The year comes to an end. The myriad things retreat. Some will hibernate. What about in terms of life? Here, I appear to be on the surface describing the seasonal changes of the valley. But then you've also heard me talking about the phases of life. So when I talk about winter, it's metaphoric of life approaching its end, except that it really isn't the end. We say goodbye to the old year. We say hello to the new year. In the same way, death of the physical body is only the beginning in disguise. It is actually a renewal for the soul. It is the conclusion of a lesson. and the start of the next lesson. Life will begin again. Spring follows winter to restart the cycle. Through all the changes, all the changing of seasons, the valley remains the valley, as it always has been and always will be. We can observe the valley for years and years. Every year, see the changing of seasons. And we know that the valley still is. That is how we extrapolate in the Tao to say that the spirit of the valley maps to the soul. The changes we go through in life map to the seasonal changes, and a year in the valley is a lifetime for the person. This is the other important concept in this chapter, the mystic female. In the original, 玄牝. 2 characters. Literally, the first character means mysterious, mystical, or mystic. The second character, that is the character for the female creature, the female of the species, the female animal. Here, it is generalized as simply female. 玄, the first character, is one that has often caused problems in translation. That is, translators who are not native speakers will look it up, will look up the definition, and they will see dark or black. Now, it doesn't mean dark or black in this context. It means mysterious, mystical, difficult to understand. And the second character there, it's a female creature or the female gender in general. And it would be better just to think of the generalized concept of the female like the female energy, the energy of the yin in the yin and yang duality. This would be the equivalent to that. And now let's take a look at the entire line together. Is called the mystic female. So that is a straightforward verbatim translation. Laozi is basically saying that the valley spirit is called the mystic female for multiple reasons. The valley spirit, as we have talked about, is receptive, accepting, welcome to all, accommodating to all. And that is a characteristic of the mystic female as well. Also, the valley spirit is tolerant, benevolent, and remember I used the example of the Maitreya Buddha to make that point. The accommodation of the valley is the generosity of its spirit. Then there is also the nurturing, life-giving aspect of it. As we talked about, the valley nurtures life. Now, everything together that we have talked about here, they map directly to the yin principle of the yin and yang symbol, which is central to the Tao. When we look at it this way, it seems quite easy, but this line has puzzled many translators, readers, and students of the Tao Te Ching. initially, what they find puzzling is the connection between the valley spirit and the mystic female. Without a deeper understanding, there doesn't seem to be any way to relate the two together. But now, with what you see here in the slide, I think it's easy to understand. The attributes of the valley has a direct correspondence to mystic female, the yin energy. So this deeper level of understanding, I think, sometimes missing from the general discussion of this chapter, is something that we will be focusing on today. And one last thing to note is that when you think about the yin principle as being an eternal principle of the universe, then it makes sense to say that it is forever. So of course, the previous line would say the valley spirit undying. It really does make sense. Continuing on to the next slide. Line 2 is called the mystic female. Now I want to relate the mystic female concept to the equivalent, something that is spoken of and referred to in Western philosophies as well, the sacred feminine. This has manifested throughout history in many different forms. And the meaning is universal to humanity, the universal mother, the first utterance of an infant shortly after being born. Ma, the eternal source of life. Representing that source is the recognition that no matter who we're talking about, as long as we're talking about human beings in the world, any gender, anyone at all, everyone is born of a mother. And it is therefore fitting to talk about the universal mother, the sacred feminine, as the source of life. So please note, there is no mystic male in the Tao Te Ching to complement the mystic female. Now, of course, it is possible to have the mystic male as a concept. It isn't talked about in the Tao Te Ching. Lao Tzu hasn't talked about it because the mystic male is not at the same level as the female. Now, have I just made a statement that is contrary to the Tao? Should they not be equivalent? At least, on the same level? Why are they not on the same level? Here's what Tao sages would say. Since the dawn of humanity, it has always been this way. Women play the primary central role in the continuation of life, while men play the supporting role. That's it. That's the way it has always been. And we can guess that's the way it will probably always be. It is the reason why, in the West, we often say, women and children first. So that is not us being unequal, not even hindered in seeing everybody equally. It is instead a practical instinct, honed by evolution over millions of years. It's the prioritizing the survival of the tribe over survival of its expendable men. So in that perspective, it is highly pragmatic, nothing to do with being feminist or sexist. The reality since primitive times is that a tribe that loses men will be able to recover in a generation or two. But a tribe that loses women and children face the real possibility of extinction. So this concept here, the mystic female, and why it reigns supreme, supported by, but not surpassed by male, this may be unfamiliar to the more male-centric Western traditions. And because of that, it is reflected in some Western translations, since the translator may come from that male-centric background. So I want to make a note of it here to emphasize the importance of the sacred feminine in the Tao. Continue on. I want to go to line 3, the gates of the mystic female. First, I would like to break down the 4 characters one by one. They are relatively simple characters. The difficulty is in the understanding of the concept behind the characters. So the first character, Shen, we talked about this being mystic or mystical. And then Pin, the second character, the female. I talked about how the original meaning was the female creature, the female animal, but it is generalized and extrapolated to mean just the female gender. Then we have a connective character, which is the apostrophe S. And lastly, we have a character that is door or gate or portal. So a literal transcription of the above is the mystic female's door or gate. The meaning is about the primary and foremost manifestation of the mystic female. And we talked about the mystic female associated with as the central source of life. So it makes sense that this refers to the transcendent life force that gives rise to everything. It is further generalized to cover not just life, but everything, period, as you will see in the next line. Line 4 says, is called the root of heaven and earth. Again, I would like to break it down. It's an important line. Take a look at the characters individually. First character is simply is. Second character, called. That's pretty much the only option of translating that character. The third character will be heaven or sky. And the fourth will be earth. So it's going to be heaven only because we don't talk about sky and earth. We talk about heaven and earth. The last character is important. It's the root. So together, 天地根, heaven, earth, root, translated as the root of heaven and earth. The root is important because the root of a plant is the source of its branches, leaves, flowers, and fruits. Ultimately, every part of the plant can be traced back to its root. You can pick the flowers and the fruits, or the leaves. You can break off the branches, but As long as the root survives, it continues on, it'll keep growing. So the root is basic or fundamental to the plant. Therefore, the gate of the mystic female is basic, fundamental, the source of any domain. When I say domain, I want to specifically talk about 天地, heaven and earth. Previously, we talked about heaven and earth as referring to the world. Now, the English words that we're using, the world itself is very flexible. It is the same way in Mandarin. When we talk about 天地, meaning the world, we can be using that term in different contexts. When in the West, we use the words the world. We also use it in many different contexts. Sometimes when we say the world, we're talking about the earth, the planet, the world in which we live. But sometimes we're not talking about the entire globe, but we're talking about an aspect of life, a domain. We may, for instance, talk about the world of dance. So that's not all of life, it's about that world. It's a world unto itself with many specific knowledge that apply just relevant to the world of dance. We can talk about the world of sports, and we immediately know that it's all about athletic activities. It's about that world. We talk about the world of magic, the world of entertainment, the world of music, movies, etc. Every usage of the term is about a subset of life that is a world unto itself. It is the same when we talk about the different domains of life represented by heaven and earth. In each case, it is a particular domain. So just like the Tao, this is a concept that spans multiple levels to represent those different domains. And I have a slide here that I hope will illustrate the multiple levels. To the left-hand side, you'll see the column for the context or the domain. And you can see the different levels here. We range from the universe to the earth, the planet itself, the biosphere, which is where the living things live on this planet. Then we go to the human species, that's we ourselves, and then we drill down further into the human mind. And you can see to the right, I'm using some graphical representations. I've got a galaxy there representing the universe. I've got the image of the earth there. That is not just the earth, but also it's the biosphere. It's all the living things, all the human beings that live on our little planet. And then, of course, I have the thinker to represent the human mind. So for each one of these domains, for each world or each level, let's talk about the root or the source. What is fundamental? What is basic in that domain? For the universe, we're talking about the root being the source of universal creation, whatever that is. Scientifically, we can call it the origin of the Big Bang. And if that is the root of the plant, what are the leaves? Well, at the universal level, at the cosmic level, we're talking about all the celestial bodies of the cosmos. And that includes the galaxies, the stars, the planets, It also includes like satellites and all the other celestial bodies out there. So at that level, all of these leaves trace back to the root of universal creation. Then let's get to the just single out one planet, our planet. And that is, of course, the Earth. And what is the root of that? What is the source of our planet? So we know from science that it's planetary formation, that it is following the formation of the solar system around the sun. Then the planet itself is undergoing geological processes over literally billions of years. And then there's, of course, the evolution of life. So with that as the root, what are the leaves? Well, we're talking about everything in the world, from the highest mountain peaks to the deepest ocean trenches, everything there. We're also talking about deep into the earth itself, to the core of the planet. Then let's go to still the world, but the living components of it, the biosphere. The root for all the living things will be the females of the species, the pin. The biological procreation for the next generation is where all living things come from. This is the source for the myriad things. Every single life form, all living things of the earth, not just at this moment, but past, present, and future. All the living things that ever were and ever will be. Then, out of all the different living things, I want to zoom in on one particular living thing, and that is us, human beings. So just like how we started out with all of the universe, but then we zoom into one planet, here we're talking about all the living things, the many, many different species, and now zooming into the species of Homo sapiens. So what is the root of that? What is the source of that? Well, we cannot deny that where we all come from, every member of the human species comes from the womb of the woman. It's the process of conception, pregnancy, and birth since the dawn of humanity. What does that produce? What does that cover? Every single one of the 8 billion people living today, plus everyone who has ever lived. We all came out of that process. So past, present, and future, all human beings come from that. Now, I want to take all the different aspects of a human being and just zoom in on one aspect, and that is the mind. The root, the gate of that, well, the source of creativity. We don't quite know what that is in human consciousness, but we have different names for that. One of them is the muse of inspiration, where artists, musicians go find their muse for inspiration. If that is the root, what are the leaves? Every idea anyone has ever had, all inventions, past, present, and future. Now, when we look at all of this, you can note that the commonality in the right-hand column, the leaves, there is something that stands out, and that is words like all and every. And indeed, just imagine if we're looking at the Earth from space, we're looking at this planet. When we do that, when we see this planet, this one image is something that contains everybody alive today. And as I mentioned, everyone who has ever lived and everyone to come, except perhaps in the distant future, people who are born on other planets, born in space, will not be included in that. But as of this point in time, when we look at the Earth, that's everybody. And it's the same when we talk about how everybody, regardless of gender, came from the birthing process. That's why we have the mystic female, the universal mother, no exceptions. And of course, ideas and inventions, all the ideas and inventions to come, things that we cannot even envision right now, they all come from that mysterious root or that gate. And all we can do is to say, well, everybody has a source of creativity. Now, we don't need to limit ourselves to just creative pursuits like arts and music and inventions and whatnot. We can expand the scope of our consideration. We can say that your mind, the gateway to your mind, the portal, that is the single source for every one of your thoughts. Some of the thoughts are ideas. Some of the thoughts are perhaps emotional reactions or contemplations, and so on. The mind being the source for all the thoughts you've ever had and ever will have will be simply a statement of fact. Your consciousness is the root to anchor your inner world, including all of your memories, all of your emotions, everything you have ever learned, all of your hopes and dreams for the future. Some of these thoughts that you have in your mind, the thoughts that you decide to act on, the thoughts that motivate you to take action, those are the ones that have a chance of manifesting in reality. For instance, just an example, if you have a certain talent, you decide to enter a contest, then there's a chance you will win. Or there's a chance that participation in the contest leads to some sort of opportunities you otherwise would not have. So the basic idea is that some of these ideas, some of the thoughts that you've had in your mind can lead to manifestation of reality. Therefore, all of your manifestations in your reality ultimately trace back to the thoughts originating from your mind, the root of it all, the gateway to all of it. When the Tao sages look at this pattern, they apply the idea to destiny and life itself. And that's why they identify everything that you see here as the gates of the mystic female. And let's drill down further into this concept, the root of heaven and earth. This is not unique to the Tao. In the Tao, from Lao Tzu, we have learned these lines. The gate of the mystic female is called the root of heaven and earth. And then we discussed about how everything that's been happening in your life ultimately trace back to some sort of thought in the mind. Therefore, your true self, this you at the deepest part of your being, the core of your being, that is the root cause of everything in your world, positive or negative. So this is a teaching from the Tao. As I said, this is not unique to the Tao. There's the Zen tradition. The Zen Buddhism tradition is a fusion of Buddhist teachings from India with Tao philosophy of ancient China. So a notable teacher in the Zen tradition is the sixth patriarch, Huineng, who lived hundreds of years ago. He was the source for the Platform Sutra, just as Lao Tzu was the source for the Tao Te Ching. So the sixth patriarch said, the self-nature can give rise to 10,000 dharmas. 自性能生万法. 10,000 dharmas is a literal translation of 万法. What it really means is all dharmas and not a literal 10,000. So what the sixth patriarch was saying is the same idea with slightly different words. Your self-nature is the source of all dharmic manifestations in your life, positive or negative. So this comes from the Zen Buddhism tradition, represented here by the lotus flower. The lotus flower has long been associated with the Buddhist teaching that the self-nature, who you truly are, can arise in the material world, much like the lotus flower growing out of the mud in the pond. Although the material world is full of tainting influences, it is possible that the self-nature is untainted by all of it, just like the lotus flower grows out of the pond, but doesn't take on any of the mud, blooming beautifully. So out of all this, what we can say is that these sages from the two different traditions were really talking about the same thing, which is a teaching about the ultimate responsibility. No matter what it is that has happened to you, good or bad, positive or negative, you ultimately are the source. It may be difficult sometimes to get our head around this idea. So I have prepared a couple of slides to help us come to grips. We mentioned positive and negative. So I want to start with the negative in life. When something bad happens to you, I want to highlight two different paradigms, the conventional thinking and the Tao mind. When bad things happen, the conventional thinking is going to look at it and then assign the cause to them, to others, other people, or factors external to us outside of our control. They are the ones. They did it to me. And a great question to ask is, well, who are they that you're talking about. So as an example, when it comes to economic conditions, they perhaps your friend will tell you, the friend who is complaining about how bad the economy is, the friend may say that, well, they did it to me, they're causing me to have economic issues. They, in this case, would be the wealthy elite who are so greedy, they satisfy their greed, they maximize their profits at the expense of the working class. And if it's not the economy, if it's something else, for instance, a common negative thing that we see all the time is someone being tardy, someone being late to an appointment. So that's a negative thing, and that person may say, well, the traffic was horrible. So they are the ones, they did it to me. Who are they? What all the bad drivers on the road. You see, they cause all the traffic problems, and they are the ones that made me an hour late. So again, the finger is pointing somewhere else. The blame is to them. When we understand that we are our own causes for everything, then that is the Tao mind which looks at it differently. I am the source of my own problems. So the friend who's complaining or the person who is late may strongly disagree with this statement. They may say, no, it wasn't me, it was them. But the Tao cultivator will look at it in a different way. When it comes to economic conditions, if the Tao cultivator is not doing so well, so it's a negative downturn in his personal finance, he may think, well, I could have planned my personal finance to take the overall economic downturn into account. I could have saved, I could have prepared for a rainy day, but I didn't do that. So at the very minimum, I contributed to the cause. I had a part in it. There was something I did not do. I did not make preparations. I did not see it coming. I did not have contingencies ready. And what about when it comes to traffic? If the Tao cultivator ran late because of bad traffic, it's not because of the bad drivers who caused traffic problems. It was the Tao cultivator who will consider how, while it was within my abilities to leave an hour early, then I would be on time instead of an hour late. But I didn't do that. So I at least contributed to the cause. I had a part in it. So this goes back to a wise saying that look back in time to all the experiences that you've ever had, the good as well as the bad, all the setbacks, all the disappointments, all the problems, all the troubles, all the road bumps in your journey. There was one thing in common in all of them, and that is you. You were there. And this is much more radical. This is saying that, well, you had a hand in it. So then let's pursue these two different lines of thought to the logical conclusion. What is the outlook for the conventional thinking? Well, the outlook is rather bleak. The outlook is not great. It's hopeless because conventional thinking says, well, I can't change them. They're the ones that caused the problem. They're the ones that did it to me. I cannot change them. So it's hopeless. From the other perspective, the Tao perspective, it's different. It's hopeful because I can always change myself. If I am the source of my own problems, I will trace the problem to that part of myself, which is the source. Then I will decide to make some changes. So what is the result? What is the outcome? In conventional thinking, well, I just told you nothing will change because I cannot change them. So life is rather depressing. The result is different for the Tao cultivator. The Tao cultivator, thinking about this, will say, well, the result is entirely up to me to decide. I get to decide what to change about myself, correcting whatever issues I may have at the source, thus producing a different outcome, a different result next time. Now, I want to emphasize that the upper row, the conventional thinking, this is a persistent and powerful illusion. It looks real. Others are to blame. I mean, come on, everybody can see that, right? It's not me, it's them. It's a powerful illusion. The bottom row, the Tao cultivator's perspective, that is the reality that is not illusory. You always have a part in it, no matter how it may look at first. And there is always something you can do. You underestimate how powerful you really are. Having addressed the negative, let's also talk about the positive. Something good. What happens when you have done something good for other people? Again, we have the conventional thinking versus the Tao mind. And here we've got the motive, the debt, and the reward. Let's go through them. In conventional thinking, what is the motive? Well, that's just the kind of person I am. I helped them. I did them a favor. So it's positioning the self at a higher perch, helping other people because, well, you have the ability to help them, so you decide to do them a favor. Now, when we talk about this radical philosophy of orienting on the self as the source, it is also the self as the recipient of everything. The Tao mind, the Tao cultivators, will turn that around and say, I actually didn't do it to benefit them. Ultimately, I did it for myself, for my own reasons. And I'm glad that I helped them. But I did it because it was the right thing to do, because it makes me a better person, because I should. Not because I was out to save people, help people, to incur some sort of debt. And that is the next column. But you see, the conventional thinking will say that, well, I did them a favor, I helped them, therefore they owe me. One day I'm going to call them in on it. I'm going to call in my chips. I'm going to collect the debt that they owe me. A lot of times in life, we hear people talk about this. Well, I still owe them a few favors. Or conversely, well, they still owe me favors from before. So I'm going to ask them to do X, Y, Z. That is depicting life in a transactional light, that everything is debt and repayment and the incurring of more debt. I want to point out this is not the perspective of the Tao cultivators. The Tao cultivator will straight up think about how, well, I did it for my own reasons. I did it for myself. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Therefore, nobody owes me anything. I don't expect anyone to repay me for whatever, because I did it because I thought it was the right thing to do. This goes on to the reward. The conventional thinking is that having done them a favor, not only do they owe me, but I should get some kind of recognition for this. I should get some kind of reward. I should be compensated in some way. As you can imagine, that's not the thinking of the Tao cultivators at all. The work is its own reward. Now, indeed, the Tao cultivator may get recognition and reward anyway, but that is not the expectation. That is not anywhere near any kind of requirement for the Tao cultivator. And again, the Tao cultivator would say, well, look, I contributed my effort only because it was the right thing to do. After all, we come into this world together in order to help one another. We're using this illusion of separation. We're forgetting that we're actually connected as one at a fundamental level of reality. We appear to be separate individuals. Therefore, in the level of that illusion, I can say, hey, I'm going to go the extra mile for you. In reality, at the underlying level of oneness, we're resolving karmic obligations for ourselves. Now, I know this is a difficult concept to grasp. Let me illustrate it this way. Think about this athlete, this incredibly gifted athlete who is phenomenal in his or her chosen field. The athlete says, what happens when the athlete says, I need to practice 1 more hour today for the coach? Okay, well, you can expect that to be something that you hear from the dedicated athletes. I need to practice 1 more hour today for the coach. And there could be variations. I need to do an extra set for the coach. That is an illustration of what I'm talking about here, because the athlete is doing that 1 more hour of practice, that extra set of exercise for his or her own self and his and her own reasons to benefit his or her own physical condition. But the illusion that we use to do that is that we're doing it for someone else. This is why ordinarily in religious teachings, you're going to hear the teachers say, we should help other people. We should do whatever we can to help other people. That is good. It is what the deity wants. The Tao transcends ordinary religions by pointing out that if you think that way, if you follow that, then it is possible to fall into a trap. That mentally you place yourself higher than the others, that you may imagine that your good deed is more important than it actually is. You may feel entitled somehow. Hey, what's in it for me? What do I get out of this? You may be keeping track of the score, and that's when we say, they owe me. I've got some chips. I'm going to collect them one day. That's the score. That's the debt. So the above, all of this is why sometimes philosophers will say there's no true altruism, that people never do anything for purely selfless reasons. So everyone does things selfish ways. Well, in the Tao, we're just recognizing the underlying oneness connecting all of humanity. For the something good that you do for other people, it is something good that you have done for yourself. So this is the application of 天地根, the root of heaven and earth, applying to life, to everything that you and I do. And now, we are at the end of our time together today, so let me jump to the summary to talk about what we have discussed. And of course, the foremost concept that we talked about today is the valley spirit. So as a quick summary of that, think about the openness, the receptivity, that the valley is accommodating, it is welcoming, it is tolerant, it's compassionate, and there's that generosity of spirit. Of course, there's the nurturing and protective aspect of the valley. The valley cradles all myriad things within it. The valley provides sustenance to all. It's not just a container, it's the container for living things. Taking a cue from that, we also want to approach other people with the protective embrace and the compassionate nature, the generosity of the valley. And lastly, let's talk about the eternal nature of the valley spirit. The valley spirit is synonymous with the yin principle, which is a universal principle that has existed since the beginning of time and continues on throughout all of eternity. This is reflective of the immortal human spirit. And here I'd like to recall to mind the example that we went through about the valley undergoing seasonal changes. So no matter how many different seasons have passed for the valley remains the valley. Its essence is still the spirit of the valley. In the same way, it doesn't matter how many lifetimes you and I go through, you remain the same individual as yourself. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.